Hey, how's it going, everyone? I'm Nate Schoemer, and you're watching my show on dog training. We are doing another live Q&A. Excuse me. Let me pull it up so I can see everyone's questions. Looks like it's taken a moment for it to come up. There we go. Perfect. All right, we have one watching so far. Let's jump into the questions. I should be able to do about an hour of live Q&As. When you're asking questions, what's going to help quite a bit, so there's been a lot of questions that were coming in on the last few live Q&As that I did, and some of the issues that we were running into was the questions were not detailed enough. So when you're writing out a question, the details that are going to matter are the context of the situation. Like if you're dealing with your dog barking or you're dealing with your dog being reactive on leash, say what's going on in the situation. So it makes it a little bit easier for me to break down what I would do if I was in that situation with your dog. So let's say you're dealing with a dog that's being reactive on leash, and you tell me when we're on a walk, he starts to pull, it gets tight, he's focusing on another dog, he becomes very stiff, and then he starts to bark and lunge. That could be a little bit more of a breakdown. Or saying, I think the behavior is based on fear because my dog will start to bark, but my dog will back up, hackles will go up, or whatever. So try to break it down into more detail, which is going to make it a little bit easier for me to answer your question the best way that I possibly can. All right, so we have 23 watching so far. I hope everyone's doing well today. So does anyone have any questions to get us started? What I'll do in the meantime, while I wait for a question to come in, is let's talk for a moment about the 3 key events to dog training. I've mentioned this on the last few live Q&As, and it's something that I've been teaching my students as well as my clients. Hey, Nate, first off, thanks for doing what you do. It's really valuable. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I'm trying to do live Q&As all the time. Like I said, my goal is to do between 3 to 5 live Q&As a day, 4 podcast episodes per month. And then as I get more established in Carmel, Indiana, and I start getting more local clients, so I still have a good amount of people that I work with, but most of them right now are virtual. So as I get more established here in Carmel and I start doing more in-person dog training, I'm going to film and document that as well, as long as the owners are okay with that. And I'm going to start producing a lot more content with dogs that I'm training and working with. So now that the questions are coming in, I am going to shift gears and focus on that. But real quick, the 3 events, and this comes up often: reward event, reinforcement event, and correction event. And if you want to learn how I break these events down and the guidelines to the game using these events, go to my website, click on nateschoemer.com, click on blog, and it's the 3 key events to dog training. And so I break down how I use these events, how I look at these events, the guidelines that I like to follow. And when you understand these events, it really does simplify dog training. Now, of course, there's a lot of details within dog training, but if we can get the big picture covered to where we can, I'm sure everyone here has heard of the 80-20 rule. So 20% of the stuff that you're going to learn is going to impact 80% of what you do with your dogs. And that's one of the best ways I've been able to break down that 20%. So then if you want to fix the final 20%, you have to learn that other 80% of the information. Not necessarily, but if we're simplifying the 80-20 rule. Okay, so my 13-week-old puppy draws blood when training with treats. It's painful. How can I prevent the excited biting? If I'm working with a puppy and that puppy has very high food drive and they have those little razor sharp teeth, what I do is, first, let me go back a step. When I'm working with puppies, the main thing that I'm focused on is I'm focused on making the training as fun as possible for the puppy that I'm working with. A lot of times when I'm working with my own puppies, I do a lot of, some people call it differential reinforcement, but that's where, for me, it's where I'm not correcting certain behaviors. So I'll give you an example. If you watch the videos that I did with Maverick when he was a puppy, he's jumping up on me, he's being crazy, and I'm not correcting it, I'm not stopping it. And the reason why, I don't want the initial relationship with a new puppy to be stop this, don't do that, no, 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 no. I want to be more like the yes man or the yes person, where I'm saying yes all the time to the dog, and then when they do things that I don't like, I ignore it. And this is initially in the very beginning, you know, first few weeks, something like that. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a desire for the dog to want to learn, a love for learning, which is very important. So when it comes to those sharp teeth, you've probably seen how I hold treats. I'm looking for something that I can use to demonstrate. So let's pretend like this is a treat, and I'm going to hold my hand up to the camera. I pretty much hold it just like this. So let's pretend that's a treat. And so the puppy is able to reach in and get the reward. Now, what happens is sometimes right here on our thumb, those sharp little razor teeth are going to get in, and I've been cut there more times than I can count. And what I do is I get athletic tape. I mean, this is what I had to do with Maverick. I get athletic tape and I wrap my fingers in the area where the dog is catching my skin. And it's not intentional. I mean, if it's the same thing that I deal with when I'm training puppies, they're not trying to bite us. They're trying to get the food. But they have such sharp little razor teeth that often we can get caught. In fact, one time I got caught pretty good with Maverick. Again, unintentional. I didn't even notice. I felt a little sting. I kept training the dog, and then suddenly I noticed there was blood on my wall because as I moved my hand around, I splattered some of my blood on the wall, and the treats were covered in my blood. He got nice and deep, and again, not aggression, just him getting access to the food. I cleaned it off, wrapped it up, and then we just went right back to training. So that's what I do when I'm working with puppies and they're biting at me. Again, I ignore a lot of behaviors as long as those behaviors are not dangerous for the puppy and they're not destructive. And really, a lot of times with puppies, I just prevent them from practicing dangerous and destructive things. So if we think about self-reinforcing behaviors, prevent, redirect, correct. So a lot of times with puppies, I just prevent. So I am more proactive with them. So same thing with if I'm taking a puppy out and I have the puppy walking out on a leash and we're exploring the environment and my puppy suddenly locks onto another dog, before the puppy starts to react, I'm pulling the puppy away, I'm getting the dog engaged with me, now I'm giving them treats, I'm playing with them, and my puppy saw the other dog. That was a bit of socializing there. That was a good experience. I saw the dog, but the puppy played with me, and that was a successful moment. I didn't give them an opportunity to start reacting and start developing those unwanted behaviors. I have a problem with intact male dogs and female neighbor's dog in heat. I'm using the e-collar. Yeah, I mean, that's something you're going to have to deal with. Patriot Pups, love your videos. Thanks. I really appreciate that. Your German Shepherd is reactive with other dogs. When he sees other dogs on leash, he's fine most of the time. He seems to have problems with males that are not neutered. With my dogs, when I'm training them, just like with the puppy, if I notice there's a certain distance that becomes very difficult for my dog to focus on me, I try to increase the distance, build a positive association, pulling out a tug toy, playing rewards, or using treats, but we don't want to wait until they're reacting. If they're already reacting, it becomes significantly harder for us to redirect the dog back to us to get them to start working and focusing on us and ignoring the other dog. And if I am going to have direct interaction with other dogs, with my own personal dogs, then I like to know the other dogs. I don't let them interact with dogs that I don't know. It's one of the reasons why I avoid dog parks unless I'm training outside of the dog park, just to get some exposure for the dog that I'm working with, to see other dogs but not have that direct contact. And the reason why is because we can't control these dogs that we don't know. We don't know how they're going to react. We don't want them to do something that's going to trigger the dog that we're working with, that could amplify the aggression or reactivity or create fear. Before I was a professional dog trainer, I made that mistake. I took my golden retriever to a local dog park and someone came in with 3 dogs, and those 3 dogs attacked my dog. Now, luckily for me, she was a very well-balanced golden retriever, and she was able to bounce back, and there wasn't any long-term damage that I had to deal with. But I ended up getting another golden retriever. So I had two golden retrievers before becoming a dog trainer, both really great dogs, and I had them again at a dog park. And this wasn't even a fenced-in dog park. It was just a really big area where people could have their dogs off leash. And a dog attacked my male golden retriever, and that did affect him, because after that he was very cautious and very hesitant around new dogs. So if we can't control the dogs, we don't want direct interaction. But if we can, meaning we know the dog, it's our dog, it was really great when I was raising Ari and Charlie, because I was still doing a lot of stay-in trains. I'm not doing stay-in trains really that often now. Mostly I teach people in person, or I do virtual training sessions. Last stay-in train I did was, I think, 8 months ago, something like that. You saw one of them on my YouTube channel, Kai, and then I had a couple golden retrievers that I was working with. But again, most of the time now I'm doing in-person training lessons, or I'm doing virtual training lessons. But back when I had Ari and Charlie as puppies, I had a bunch of stay-in train dogs, so I was able to create these play groups. I was already working with the dog, so I had some control over each dog, and I had these play groups that Ari and Charlie they were able to play with lots of different dogs in a very controlled and managed environment. This is something that is doable at some daycare facilities for dogs, but it has to be a good doggy daycare. A lot of the ones, if they're focused more on profit, then they're not going to have enough people managing the play groups. They're probably not going to be rotating the dogs as much. Certain things that, if they are doing, it's going to cost the company a little bit more, but it's going to be better for the dogs that are in the play group. Again, better rotation, better management, better prevention, making sure that all the experiences are positive for your dog. Now, going back to the question about the dog being reactive, it could be a thing that takes some time, but try to figure out what the distance is where your dog's not reacting but can see the other dog. And I'm sure there's also a little bit of, if the other dog is noticing your dog. I mean, I've seen that lots of dogs that I'm working with, it the other dog on the other side of the street or on the other side of the field isn't paying attention to the dog that I was training. The dog that I was training wouldn't pay attention to them. But once they both locked eyes on each other and there was a little bit of body language exchange, then that became a little bit harder to manage. So again, figure out the distance, try to create a positive association, prevent your dog from reacting. Before they react, try to look at those subtle body changes. Remember, change in body posture, a sudden change is something that we need to recognize and pay attention to. If my dog's moving naturally, just very comfortable, relaxed, and suddenly the body gets stiff or the head gets locked on in a certain direction, these are things that we want to pay attention to, and we want to make sure that it doesn't escalate into the dog reacting, because again, then it becomes much harder for us to control our dogs. All right, where was I? The Tasman 63, thanks, I really appreciate that. All right, let's go to the next one. He is training for search and rescue, and I can't have him wanting to go after other search dogs. How can I fix his reactivity? So again, same thing. I mean, this was the same German Shepherd that we were talking about. You're just going to, again, think of the concept of counter conditioning and desensitization. That's what I'm going to be doing, or that's what I would be doing if I was in your situation. And of course, more obedience always helps. Off-leash remote training collar is what I like to use if I have a dog off-leash. If you haven't tried, Patriot Pups, if you haven't tried the tone setting on e-collar technology remote training collars, I'm pretty sure they all have the tone setting right now. For me, it was a massive game changer. It gave me the ability to communicate with my dog with the remote training collar in a form of negative reinforcement. Remember, we turn pressure on. When they comply, we turn it off. The negative happens after the behavior, and that's the removal of whatever it is that we've added to alter our dog's behavior. And what's really nice about the tone is we're not having to go right to stimming the dog for doing something. We can give them this tone as a form of communication and warning. And since I've been using the tone with my dogs, I mean, Charlie, I pretty much never correct. He's just a super compliant, always next. I don't remember the last time I had to correct him at all. But Ari and Maverick, they're a little bit more I don't want to say independent, but I don't want to say stubborn either, but they have a little bit more will to their behaviors and things that they want to do. And since I've been using the tone, I almost never have to correct them. The tone is a really great form of communication. Again, it can even snap them out of certain things. So I've noticed with dogs that might get overly excited or they cross that threshold where they suddenly become harder to control because they're just not thinking clearly. And if you try to correct them, it makes it worse. They get more amped up. The tone has been working really great because it kind of snaps them out of it. So if you haven't tried the tone on the remote training collar, definitely give that a shot. The way that people teach the low-level stim on the remote training collar for dogs as negative reinforcement is the same way I train the dogs on the tone. Tone comes first. I show the dog what I want. They do the behavior. I turn off the tone. I reward the dog. I do this over and over again until I press the tone and the dog does the behavior that I want without that additional help. Now I know the dog has an understanding of the tone, and then I'm going to start using it in multiple different environments, get the dog generalized to it. Even with my dogs, when I take them all out on one of my little nature walks and they're walking and they're going all over the place, if they started to reach outside my invisible barrier, approximately 20 feet or so, then I would have to say their name. I would have to say Maverick or Ari or Charlie, and then that would cue them to turn back around. Now, if they get too far, I don't have to say any of that. I just reach down, tap the tone, dog comes back. Good, nice job, buddy. And it works so well. So give that a shot. Okay, let's see what the next question is, and I hope that was helpful. Hey Nate, my 10-month-old puppy from Romania streets is a very picky eater. Can you talk about how to get her to eat her kibble reliably? We also feed canned food, but it's not complete for puppies. Okay, so when I'm working with a dog or puppy that has low food drive, wanting something is often dependent on, we can think about the scarcity principle, and this applies to humans as well. And also, if you could hear a bunch of noise, we had a tornado yesterday, and so they're cleaning up the streets outside. A bunch of trees and things were knocked over. So I don't know if you all can hear that, but there's a bunch of noise outside. The scarcity principle. If something is scarce, and a lot of marketers do this, you've probably seen it on multiple occasions, like, oh, get it before time runs out, we only have 5 left, whatever. The more scarce something is, the more wants. And this is why trainers talk about food deprivation. And it sounds really terrible. Oh my gosh, food deprivation, this is so bad. But if we wait and we make sure the dog is a little bit more hungry before we work with them, then they're more likely to be motivated to take the food. And then also, as I said earlier, when I'm doing puppy training, I use food right away at the beginning, and I used to say that I make the dogs work for all their food. But I don't like using the word work anymore, because when people hear the word work, just like when people hear the word alpha or dominant, there's another word that comes into their mind. Work sucks, it's boring, I don't want to do it, it's not something that I enjoy or I look forward to. But when we hear play, oh, play is fun, I enjoy it, I want to do more of it, it's a great way to bond and socialize. And so now I say the dogs play for their food. And what I was saying before about the dominance or the alpha, I don't like those words because for a lot of people, what it does, like dominance and alpha, often goes right to aggression in people's head. They think they have to be aggressive to their dog in order to establish dominance or in order to establish the alpha position, which usually almost always does more harm than good. And so if I do a little bit of scarcity with the food, and then when I am offering the food, I do it in a way of play, so it's fun. I'm tossing treats, I'm moving, I'm incorporating it in with the dog's training or the puppy's training to make it really fun. There's another trainer online, Yorkshire Canine Academy, I think is the name of the YouTube channel, and he has a pretty interesting video on how he starts to get dogs to work in a sense or play in a sense for their food. So he'll make it gradually more and more difficult for them to get their food. So he might start off with a work to eat feeder or a slow feeder bowl where it has all those plastic kind of it's like a maze. It looks like a maze when you look at the bowl, and it makes it harder for the dog to eat the food. It takes them a little bit longer, or a work to eat feeder, or one of those Kong feeders where they have to roll it around and the kibble falls out. So that would be like a first step. And then the next step, maybe you put the bowl in a box. The dog has to crawl into the box to get to the food. So you gradually make it more challenging. Now, I haven't personally done that, but when I watched the video, to me, it makes sense. It seems like a good process that would probably work. And this is another reason why I'm always so big about talking to people about the science and understanding the correct terminology and what this terminology means, because then you can see something, and even if you haven't done it before, like I haven't done it, but that seems to follow the science. So even without personally doing it, I'm pretty confident that it's going to work, just from having that understanding of how dogs learn, how they process information, and of course all the correct scientific terminology that people much smarter than me have already come up with. Okay. I have a 4-month-old pulling on the leash, tries to eat leaves, licks rocks, behaves well in the driveway, but all goes away on the road. Okay, so I mentioned it earlier. If you're in a location where you can get a remote training collar, I know they're already banned in some countries, but I've had lots of clients that were dealing with the issue of dogs picking up things on walks. Now, if I'm not using a remote training collar and I have a dog that does that, it's going to depend on the dog. So if it's a puppy, usually what I do is I'll pick the puppy up. So I'm going to use my little doggy demo here. And what I do is I come under the puppy's belly here. So I support them, and then across their chest here. So they're nice and supported. And then I pick them up like this. I hold their back end up in the air and their head down. And they almost will always drop whatever's in their mouth. Once they drop what's in their mouth, I set them down off to the side and off we go. So I'm not taking it from them. I personally don't like doing the fish hook technique unless it's my last option. I need to get something out of the dog's mouth really fast. I don't want them to think that I'm taking things away. So that works with leaves, it works with rocks, and then also preventative measures. If I'm walking the dog and I notice they're about to pick up a rock or a leaf, then I use the leash to prevent that. And if I'm too slow and the puppy or the dog gets it, then I use the next option of getting it out of their mouth. If they're a bigger dog, then if I see something like that as a problem, I'm going to take the time to teach them the out or the drop it command. If I can, I always like to start with value transfer. Value transfer is we have to have two things. I'm trying to look if I have two things that are the same. But anyways, we have to have two things of equal value. So I'm just going to use these remotes, pretend like they're the exact same remotes. The dog has this one, and now this also goes into how the dog plays. So this is also very important. Ideally, we want to be able to do this with a toy. So I have two toys that are exactly the same. If I have a toy that enjoys playing tug, the act of playing tug is their preferred way of play and engagement. So I'll use Ari back there as an example. She loves tug. If I release the toy, she wants to bring it right back, and she wants to go right back into tug play. My German Shepherd Maverick, he prefers winning the toy and running around the neighborhood with it. So he is a little bit more possessive, but he still likes to come up and engage for a moment, but he likes the victory lap. Let me have the toy, let me run in a few circles to show everybody what I just won. And then Charlie, he cares way more about the chase. He'll play tug, but if he knows I could throw it for him instead, that's his preferred thing. So our dogs are going to have different preferences when it comes to play, and that's going to determine how I do the value transfer. So let's say I have a dog that likes the tug. Once I'm playing with them, I give them the reward. Then after I give them the reward, I pull out the new toy, and I go, hey, buddy, here it is. They drop this toy. They grab this one because, again, they would rather play tug. Now, that option may or may not work for a dog like Maverick because I gave him what he wants. He's going to go run around with it. And if I go, hey, look what I got, he goes, I already got this one. So with him, what I would do is basically I take it and I lock it up against my body, usually my hip, because it's less likely to move around. I don't want to just hold it in my arm because my dog's going to pull and my arm's going to move, and that's still going to be fun for him. So I lock it up against my hip as strong as I can. Then I pull out the new one. I go, ooh, look at this. Or I may even toss the new one if that gets him to let go of this one. Once I know I can get them to do the behavior, just like everything else, then I add the verbal command. So then I do the behavior, like I either stop or I give them the reward, I say drop it, then I present the new one. And I do this over and over until the dog drops it on the drop it command. The next option is using negative reinforcement. I can turn pressure on with the leash. I can hold it, wait, once they drop the item, yay, turn out the pressure, let them get it. So I want the dog to be able to release it with a little bit of leash pressure. So then if I do have a bigger dog and they pick up something on a walk that I don't want, I can say wrong, or I can say drop it, and I can apply leash pressure. Remember, for me, wrong is a signal for negative reinforcement. It's a reinforcement event. I want the dog to do a specific behavior. Once they do that behavior, that's when I end that reinforcement event. So if I say wrong or drop it, the experience is the same for the dog. I'm making a sound, and then I'm getting the dog to do a behavior. A lot of times when I'm being reactive to the dog, I use wrong, because it's much easier for me to say wrong within a second or so of the dog doing the behavior than telling the dog exactly what to do, because sometimes I mess that up. And if you run into those same types of issues, using a word like wrong or oops or something like that is very easy to be consistent with. Meaning my dog might pick up something and I say, this isn't as good of an example. Let's say jumping up on the sofa or breaking a stay. They break the climb stay. I might go sit, down, climb. Gosh darn it. But if I just say wrong, it's much easier. So a lot of times I use wrong. Wrong, it's just an easier way for me to respond to something my dog is doing and saying the right word in a second or so. But if you are good at saying the right word, definitely feel free to say drop it or release or out, whatever your word is. Then I would apply the pressure, I wait, the dog drops it, yay, good dog, and then we go on a walk. Or we continue the walk. The other option is using the tone setting on the remote training collar. Get your dog conditioned to the tone. If they go to pick something up, and what's really nice about the tone setting on the collar is they have it as classical conditioning, Pavlovian conditioning, meaning you press it, after a second and a half, it transitions to a stim. So if your dog doesn't comply within the first second and a half, which they learn to comply very quickly, and it works really, really well, your dog goes to pick up something, you do the tone, blah, they're going to spit it out right away. And that works incredibly well. And that's my preferred option to do now, because I'd rather do that than having to lift up on the leash or things like that. Now with the puppy, I'm going to pick up. I'm not using the remote collar on the puppy yet. I wait till they're older before I introduce a remote collar to a puppy. Puppy, I'm usually going to have them on a harness. They're going to be running around, exploring their environment, having a good time. Remember, puppies, all about positive association. Lots of play, lots of positive association, having a good time, enjoying the puppy, building a desire to want to be with us, want to learn, and again, building that confidence through positive experiences. Okay, oops, it just jumped. I don't know where I'm at now. Okay. Is there anything I could do to reduce the pulling and the trying to eat everything? Also, what would be a good age to start loose leash training seriously? And should I use a harness in the meantime? And this is going to be personal preference. When I've trained clients' dogs and they've had puppies, they want loose leash walking, and I can get a 4-month-old, even a 3-month-old to do loose leash walking. For my own dogs, I usually don't worry about that. It's not an issue as long as I can prevent the dog from practicing unwanted behaviors. When I do take them out, that's my main concern when they're a puppy. I don't want them barking. I don't want them becoming reactive. And when I have them on a harness, I don't care if they pull. I want them to pull. I don't like to use those no-pull harnesses or any of the harnesses that restrict pull. I want it to be distributed nicely across their chest. The V ones are really good. Some of the other ones that just put pressure here. You don't want the ones that slide up and put pressure on the dog's throat. You want to make sure the pressure is being put on the shoulders and the chest, and it's not restricting any of their natural movement. And then I let them explore, let them pull, let them have a good time, not worried about it. If I notice that they become locked on to another dog or something like that, I might change directions. I'm redirecting the dog. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not going to stand there and have the leash tight as the dog is pulling, looking at the other dog with that tension. So if we think about protection training, or even basic obedience where we use frustration to get certain behaviors. A classic one is you put the dog on a harness, especially those ones that have those little handles. Let's say I'm helping you train your dog. You have this new puppy. I have a harness on the puppy. I grab the handle, and then you run away from the puppy and I apply tension. So the puppy feels the tension, and then you're calling the puppy and the puppy's getting really excited, really excited, really excited. And then I release, boo, off the puppy goes. We built up this is what trainers call loading. We're loading the dog and then we're releasing them, and all that energy gets placed into whatever it is we're directing it to. This is why protection trainers put dogs on back tie. They make sure there's tension, and then they tease the dog with toys. They get them frustrated, the dog reacts, and we direct that the way that we want. And a lot of times we unintentionally do that in the wrong situation with our puppies or dogs. Leash is tight happens all the time. A leash being tight is one of the most common mistakes that we all make. Not paying attention, the leash is tight. I can't tell you how many lessons and sessions and trainers that are learning where I'm constantly saying, your leash is tight, your leash is tight, your leash is tight. Now, why is it important that we don't want the leash tight? If I just say don't have a tight leash, but I don't give you the reason behind it, there's less incentive to do it. Tight leash, fine when the dog's on a harness and we want them to pull, but not in a situation where the dog might react. Again, any barriers, anything that could create frustration. This is why dogs fence fight. There's a barrier, creates frustration. Now we have fence fighting. Or the dog's on the leash, it's tight, they want to get to someone or something. That frustration gets transferred into them being reactive on leash. I just totally lost my train of thought. Give me a moment while I try to get back to where I was. We're talking about the okay, loose leash, that's right. So if I have a dog and I'm using the leash and I want it to stay loose, the reason why, if I have a dog that's hanging out next to me and the leash is always tight, so there's tension right here, the dog can feel it. The moment, and there's a little bit of forward movement, it may not even be hard. It's not like the dog's pulling and choking himself, but there's a little bit of forward movement and there's a little bit of pressure. The moment I release, that energy, boo, goes forward. But if I pull the dog, this is a simple exercise. Take your dog to a location where, and you know what, I'll actually attach a leash onto my little puppy here. This is a really simple way, so a fun little exercise. Go in a location that's not too difficult for your dog, but a location where your dog wants to pull or wants to go somewhere. All we do is they go ahead of us, we make the leash tight, we pull them back to where we want, then we go loose. Now what happens once we go loose, they're gonna go forward again. Once they go forward, we pull them back to where we want them, and then the leash goes loose. After enough of these, the dog's gonna realize the most comfortable place to be is where the leash stays loose. Now, if I do even drop the leash, in the dog's world, nothing changes. They don't feel the tension to where they're going to move forward. And that's a very simple exercise to do. The thing is, you don't want to get frustrated because I pull the dog back, I go loose, dog goes forward again. Gosh darn it, why don't you stay in this spot? Every time I pull you back, you're going forward. Just know that it's a certain amount of reps. I've had dogs where it took 100 reps. I mean, I don't know the exact number, but I had to do quite a bit, and then eventually a dog just sits there. I've had other dogs where I had to do like 3. I do it a couple times. Oh, now the dog sits and maintains the position. So that's a really simple way to get a dog walking and being on the loose leash without having the dog in the formal heel position. And for me, when I'm doing loose leash, I use a collar. I do like the martingale collar. The reason why I like the martingale collar is when it sits on the dog's neck, I don't know how well you guys can see it, but when it sits on the dog's neck, I'm trying to wait till the dog gets in focus. There we go. It sits loose. Then when I pull on it, it's going to get tighter. So right there. So I get it tight to where it's snug around the dog's neck, but it's not choking them like a choke chain would. This way, if the dog tries to get out, and the common technique is the dog's duck their head under, they try to slip it out, and off they go. And that happens with the flat normal collars. But with the martingale, it prevents that. They're not able to slip their head out and take off. And that's why I like using the martingale. And then a technique that I use for basic loose leash walking, where the dog doesn't have to maintain a specific position, is as I'm walking, and I have this in my video course that I have on Sit, Stay, Learn, when the leash gets tight, wherever the dog is, I count 1 Mississippi in my head, and then I do a little kind of, it's not so much a yank and it's not a pop. It's kind of like in between, or it's not a pull. It's actually kind of more like a yank, if I'm being honest. But I'm having it here, and then all I'm doing is a little flick of the wrist. And it's just enough to get them to come back a little bit. Now, the reason why I wait a second and a half, or a second, I do this in my head. I go, the leash gets tight. I go 1 Mississippi. And then I pull the dog back, is because that 1 Mississippi, that 1 second gives the dog the opportunity. The leash getting tight becomes the cue for the dog to do what I want. And so when I do that type of walking, I let the leash get tight, but only for a very small window, because I want the dog to feel it get tight, go, oh, and go back before I do the little pull. And it works incredibly well. I've done it with lots of different dogs. Now, that's how I do my informal walk wherever you want around me, but don't pull on the leash. And then if I'm doing loose leash walking, where I want the dog to walk right next to me, then I teach the dog that position. I teach him how to get to that position. And then as we're walking, we can start building duration in the position. I talked about this on the episode that we did yesterday, or 2 days ago rather, where we can release the dog after they hold it for a moment, call them back, walk a little bit, release, and then we can build duration as the dog gets better with that exercise. One of the mistakes that I've made in my career is expecting dogs to walk too long, too soon. Like, you can do it. I mean, I can take most dogs and get them to walk on a loose leash and just walk there pretty early on for a good amount of time, but it's not super fun for the dog. And if we consider Premack's principle, where Premack principle is a less likely behavior for a more likely behavior, in this case, the more likely behavior is the dog running around, smelling things, and being a dog. The less likely behavior is walking next to us at our slow human pace, where we're significantly slower than the dog. And of course, the type of dog matters. If we look at some of the highest energy dogs, your Vizslas, your Border Collies, your Malinois, and then we look at some of the lower energy dogs like a Newfoundland or an English Bulldog or something like that, they're going to be more likely to walk at our pace or to walk slower because they don't have that desire, that motivation to walk as fast as perhaps a Vizsla would, or any kind of hunting dog or working dog. And so that's going to matter as well. But thinking of what the dog wants, and again, giving them what they want to do what we want. And this exercise is great because really the main thing is, why do we want a dog to walk nicely next to us? What is the actual practical application? Is it to look like we have control of our dog and we have our dog in the position? Or can we think about it as something that we use in certain specific scenarios? I'm walking by another person and their dog, I'm going to bring my dog into heel position. I'm at the farmer's market, I'm going to keep my dog in the heel position. I'm working with a service dog and I'm out in public, I'm going to keep my dog in the heel position. So there's areas where it is necessary and it is very useful. And then other times, I think it's great to let our dogs be dogs. I hope that answered that question. Let's move on to the next one. Okay, so tell me the difference between the trainer and the behaviorist. If we're looking at the way people traditionally define the two, I personally think that a good dog trainer can deal with behavioral issues and obedience. They can do both. What a lot of people think is they think, oh, trainer teaches specific behaviors. Behavioralists deal with behavior problems. It sounds like it's in the name. I've had multiple occasions where someone reaches out to me, we're talking, and they go, oh, I was actually just thinking, I don't have any obedience I want my dog to do. I just want them to stop the behavioral stuff. Do I need to contact a behavioralist? And same thing, if someone defines themselves as a behavioralist, I think a good behavioralist should also be able to train the dog. It's all the same stuff. We're shaping behaviors, we're directing behaviors, we're stopping unwanted behaviors. But if we're going to simplify it, a lot of people think trainers teach behaviors, behavioralists fix behavioral issues. But a good trainer or good behavioralist should be able to do both. Is the e-collar the right tool? I mean, depending on what you're using it for, I like the e-collar. I use the e-collar, and when used the right way, I think it's a fantastic tool. Okay, 5-month-old, when I walk her on leash, collar, or harness, she either becomes indifferent to other dogs or becomes unmanageable. She growls and seems like she wants to eat the other dog. Is my dog reactive or is my correction timing inadequate? What can I do? Small dog, submissive dog. Okay, if think of what's creating. So, is there something that the other dog is doing? And this is what I said a little bit earlier. You might have a dog that doesn't react at all to certain dogs. And then, if you pay attention, you might notice that it's the dogs that aren't paying attention to your dog, is what creates that. My dog's yawning. I got him on the baby cam. That there's no reason for the dog to react. Like, oh, I'm looking at the dog. Dog's not paying attention to me. So think about someone at the bar and they're trying to get into a fight. Let's just do a simple example. And they're staring people down. The ones that don't look back, don't pay attention to them, they don't do anything. But the moment someone else locks eyes, oh, now it's going to escalate into something else. And that can happen a lot of times with dogs. And so if I see a dog and I know the dog that I'm working with starts to react early, or there's certain dogs that the dog reacts to, then I'm going to redirect pretty quickly. A lot of times I won't correct, meaning I'm not going to use positive punishment. And a lot of times I don't recommend people doing that unless you're really good at your timing. You know it's not fear-based, because using punishment in a situation where the dog is reacting out of fear will often make the fear worse. We are solidifying the fact that the dog should be afraid. So I move away from the situation. I play with the dog, always trying to build, again, I've said it dozens of times, that positive association, which is really, really important. And a 5-month-old puppy, I really want to focus building positive experiences. Having a dog get exposed to lots of other dogs is usually very easy if you're in a populated area that has a local dog park. You go to the dog park, but you don't go in the dog park. You go to a distance far enough where your dog can see, but not where your dog is reacting, and you do fun things with your dog. And over time, you gradually get closer. Now, a lot of the dogs going to the dog park, think about where their focus is going to be. If I have a dog and that dog is walking towards the dog park and there's lots of dogs in that area, this is where I'm going, this is where I want to be. And then there's a dog off to the side that way that's not really paying attention to me too much, is interacting with their human, I'm probably going to be looking this way, which means your dog is going to end up seeing your dog's going to see a lot of dogs that aren't trying to engage with your dog, seeing dogs from a distance, which becomes easier to control and manage. So prevention and management are two really great tools, because if a dog doesn't start an unwanted behavior or bad behavior, they don't think about doing it. So there was a video by another trainer that they posted, and I think I mentioned this 2 days ago, or at least I was thinking about it. I'm not quite sure. But the video said how people think dog trainers deal with food aggression. And it shows that video of Cesar Millan. A lot of you have probably seen it, where he gets bit by a Labrador that had food aggression issues. And in the situation, if you watch it, in my opinion, I think Cesar Millan was being very aggressive. Well, if you're acting aggressive towards something or someone, it shouldn't be a surprise when they act aggressive back. That's a very natural reaction. And then the video cuts to another shot and it says how dog trainers actually deal with food aggression. And it has some happy music playing, and there's a Malinois inside of a kennel, and the Malinois looks very, very happy, and he's giving the Malinois a bowl of raw food, sets it in, closes the door. And there's some people in the comments, oh, that's not fixing it, that's just avoiding it, that's this, that, and the other. It's like, if we don't create the problems, we don't have to deal with them. Every single resourcing case that I've had that I deal with, food aggression, almost every single one of them were caused by the human trying to be the alpha, trying to dominate, taking things away. If we don't ever take things away, we don't create the issues. The dogs don't think about it. They don't think you're going to take it away. So I can give any one of my dogs a bowl of food, and then I can grab that food and move it and place it somewhere else, and they don't think about having to guard their food because there's no reason. I'm not going to take it away. If I have multiple dogs, I feed them in separate crates. So one, they're not thinking about eating their food quickly so they can steal the other dog's food, or if they're concerned about the other dog taking their food, when they're in their crate, they don't think about it. So a lot of times, if we make sure we can avoid the problems from ever happening, they don't think about doing it. If we can use a human analogy, such as smoking cigarettes. I smoked cigarettes from 12 years of age to 18. I quit at 18, which is kind of ironic because that was the legal age when I was 18. And still, I see people smoking. It's like, oh, that looks nice. I don't want to do it because I know it's really bad for my health, but there's still some desire there. And if you talk to people and if you're listening and you either smoke or you have smoked before or you've used those vape pens, any sort of nicotine, it's much harder to quit after you've already done it. But if you've never done it before, then you don't have the desire or the need. It doesn't bother. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing with things like digging or getting into the trash. If I prevent my dog from ever digging, if I prevent my dog from getting into the trash, if I take these steps in the early stages, then I never have to worry about it later because the dog doesn't discover that it's a fun activity. And then it makes working with our dog. So like a lot of things in the beginning with puppies, if we're doing it right when we're raising a puppy, and of course it depends on the puppy. I didn't have to do very much for my golden retrievers. They were just really well-behaved dogs. And if we think about a well-trained dog versus a well-behaved dog or a combination of the two, well-behaved dogs, they just don't have the desire to do some of the unwanted behaviors that other dogs do, such as digging or getting into the trash. And so they don't have the desire to pull, they don't have the desire to bark or react, and they appear well-trained, but they're just very well-behaved. It's in their nature. But some dogs, having a lot of the management stuff set up in the very beginning, like doing the puppy play pens and then doing the crates in different areas and making sure we potty train them the right way from the beginning so we don't have to deal with a dog that realizes it's very nice and easy to go potty inside the house. Because we already know we can't show a dog something that they did after the fact. I can't take a dog, and this is something I can't stand when I see this on videos, and some of you have probably seen it. It'll be like a TikTok video or a YouTube short, and it shows two dogs, and the camera is aiming at the two dogs, and then it pans over to the trash, and then it pans back to the two dogs, and it's like, which dog is the guilty one? And one dog looks more guilty. Their head is down. They're licking their lips. You can tell they're a little bit stressed. And everyone's like, oh, we know who the guilty one. We know who. It's like, no, we don't. Because that's what's known as an appeasement gesture. If your dog knows you're mad and upset, they will often do those types of behaviors. Again, they're called appeasement gestures. It's the same thing for people. If there's about to be a bar fight, let's go back to the bar. If there's about to be a bar fight and you have the person who comes in and goes, hey, everybody, let's keep it cool, chill out, we're having a good time. That's the same thing as the dog lowering its head, like, all right, my human's upset. Hey, don't be upset. I'm here. I'm not trying to cause any problems. And then the human's like, he's the guilty one. It hurts my head because it's bad for the dogs. It creates unnecessary stress, and these people think they're making funny videos. It's so irritating. But anyways, here's a good analogy for, and I know I'm kind of going in a different direction, so I hope everyone finds this interesting. This is the best analogy I can come up with punishments that happen after the fact and what's going on in the dog's head. So if I come home and trash has been knocked over and I'm upset, my dog's going to know I'm upset, but my dog's not going to know that it was because I knocked over the trash. I could take my dog, I could shove my dog's face into the trash. I can I've seen people do this, another stupid video. I can grab my dog's paws and pick up the trash and put it in the trash. Again, very stupid to do. Don't do it, not recommended. I can do that, but the dog's not going to connect it to them knocking over the trash. And so here's the analogy. Imagine that you're a prisoner of war in a country where you don't speak the language, and you have a prison cell and there's guards that watch you every day. You use the toilet every day, no problem, no issues. One day you're bored and you have a tool that you can start carving into the wall. You took it from the chow hall or whatever, cafeteria, and you're carving into the wall, and the guards see you carving in the wall, and they start yelling at you in a language you don't understand. They run into your cell, they grab you, and they shove your face into the toilet. Are you going to think that they shoved your face into the toilet because you used the toilet? Or are you going to think they're shoving your face into the toilet because you were carving on the wall? Because that's what you were doing when they started yelling at you. Having your face getting shoved into the toilet was the punishment for carving on the wall. That's the same thing that's going to happen in our dog's mind. If I come home and there's a poop on the ground, and I start yelling at my dog, and I take my dog and I shove my dog's face into their own stool, my dog's going to think whatever they were doing when I started yelling at them is what they're being punished for. So we cannot punish dogs after the fact unless we want to create a very stressful environment. Again, something that I mentioned earlier in order to have a balanced dog, not earlier today, a few days ago, was, and it was something that I picked up in a book that I was reading recently where I was talking about human stress. And you know what? It's worth reading again for those of you that were not for the last live one. I'm just going to pull it up and read it because I took a picture of it. Psychological stress can be caused by a perceived lack of certainty, control, predictability, social support, or belonging. So this is a book written about people, but it's the same thing with our dogs. If they have a lack of certainty, if they have a lack of control, again, that's what opera conditioning is for. Opera conditioning, the dog's recognition of patterns within their control, or at least we want them to believe that they're in control. So our dogs can make good or bad things happen based on their actions and how we teach them and how we set up the environment. If their environment is completely unpredictable, they're going to be stressed out. If they have no social support, if they don't feel like they belong, these things will create issues. So if we do those things for our dogs, we keep them mentally stimulated, we make sure they have a sense of control or predictability within their environment, we make sure they feel like they're part of the group and the team, and we mentally stimulate, physically stimulate, and show affection, we're going to have really, really great dogs. Okay, sorry, I went in a huge different direction there, but I hope it was valuable. And I know I say that every time that I hope it was valuable, because I really do. I don't want to waste your time when you're sitting here and listening to me talk about dog training. I want it to be valuable, even if it's things that you know already, or if you are a dog trainer, perhaps you know a lot of this information, but maybe I say something in a way that you like and you can plug it into your own training system when you're working with your clients. So I hope you get something worthwhile out of this. Okay. Would you run a reactive class? I'm not quite sure what you mean by that. Do you mean doing a live Q&A all on dogs being reactive, or doing like a group training class with reactive dogs? If that, like doing a live Q&A talking mostly about reactivity, sure, that could be great. Doing a group training class with lots of reactive dogs? No, probably not, because I couldn't control all the dogs. They're all going to be reacting, feeding off each other, and we're just going to make the issue worse. I'm going to work with reactive dogs one-on-one, build the communication channels that I need in order to effectively work with the dog, and then I'm going to present the dog with situations that they can handle. And this is what I call environmental difficulty assessment. When I take a dog into a certain environment, excuse me, my ear itched. When I take a dog into a certain environment, I rate it on a scale of 0 to 5. 0 being the easiest, 5 being the most difficult. And dependent on where my dog is, I like to consider the dogs that I train certain levels. So it's just something that I do in my head. So this one dog that I'm training is only level 1. It's a brand new dog. I haven't trained it enough. It hasn't leveled up very high. And then other dogs could be a level 10, meaning the dog has had a lot of obedience. They've been in a lot of different situations. And so their level is higher, meaning they can go to different environments if you compare it to like video games. And if I'm looking at an environment, I go, okay, this is a level 4 environment for this dog, and this dog has not had the right amount of training to do certain behaviors in this environment, then I'm only going to ask from the dog what I think they're capable of within that environment. So it's something that we progressively work on and build our dogs up. We don't want to assume just because our dog does something in one environment that they can do it in another. And this is something we hear all the time. Someone is reprimanding their dog and they're going, you know this, you know this. They're trying to tell the dog to sit or to down in a very difficult environment for that dog. And this is based on the external factors that are motivating for the dog, whether there's things in the environment that they're afraid of or things in the environment that they want. They want to engage with, they want to go to. So these are external motivational factors is what I call them. And the more there are and the stronger these external factors are, the harder it becomes to control our dog. And so if you only teach your dog to lay down on command inside the house, and then you go outside and you tell your dog to down, your dog's not generalized. That environment's different. It's more difficult. And so while you're sitting there and you're going, you know this, nope, the dog actually doesn't know it. And so that's why my rule for my own dogs, or my guideline rather, I should say, is if I'm working any dog and I have them in an environment, before I ever correct them in that environment, or before I can assume that they can do it in that environment, I want them to be 80% proficient. So that means every time I give them a command in a new environment, until they've proven that they know the command in that environment, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And after the command and that half-second pause to prevent overshadowing, I'm going to give the dog the answer. Down, cue the dog into the down. Good, nice job. All right, let's move on. We only have about 5 more minutes, unfortunately. Time goes by fast. I love hanging out with everyone. Okay, yeah, because I have a virtual session coming up. What do I do if the distance between my dog and the dog on the other side of the street in my neighborhood is too close for him to handle? Then I try to move away from that situation, or I just don't want the dog to bark and react. I'm still going to try to move away, because if we're trying to fight a response, an emotional response that our dog is having, often it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So that would be, again, if we're thinking about environmental difficulty assessment, that environment is too difficult for that dog's level of training. I'm going to back up. Okay, I'm going to work on the dog a little bit more, and I'm going to try again later or next time I'm in that situation. Or if my dog, I may not be able to tell my dog sit or heel or something like that, but I can have the dog sit and not bark and not react, I might do that as well. The situation and the dog that I'm working with is really going to determine how I'm going to respond to that. If I can get the dog's focus away from the other dog and I can get engagement, I'm going to do that. I'm going to give him some toys. All right, let's go over here. Let's do something else. Yay. If the dog is pulling and reacting and it seems uncontrolled, then I'm just going to walk away from the situation. I'm just going to walk away, meaning I'm going to walk with the dog. Even if I have to pull, I'm just going to walk the opposite direction, try to get out of that area, that threshold where my dog is reacting, and then I'm going to try to work with them over there. If the dog is staring, but they're not reacting, then I might just stay there. Okay, you could watch the dog, and then if the dog engages with me, then I'm going to respond and engage back with the dog. And so, again, there's lots of little variables, and this is why having an understanding of dog body language, which really, dog body language, it's not that difficult to read. At least I don't think it's that difficult to read. And I think most people it's not that difficult, because I believe the fact that, we have evolved 14 to 40,000 years, something like that with dogs, depending on what source you're looking at. We've spent all this time evolving with them that we learned how to understand their body language and they learned how to understand ours, and then you think about some dogs like terriers that are very expressive with their eyebrows. You can tell by looking at a dog, for the most part, if the dog is happy, if the dog is excited, if the dog is nervous, if the dog is fearful, if the dog gets locked on to another source and it's going to react. Most of us can see it. Dogs are talking to us constantly. Only if we pay attention will we see it, though. A lady threatened to shoot your dog at a dog park. So, some people are crazy. I would avoid dog parks anyways. That woman seems like she has some serious issues, whoever threatened to shoot your dog. It doesn't even make sense. Like, you're going to a dog park, you love dogs, and then you threaten to shoot another dog. Not very logical. Hello, good sir. Hello, how are you? Could you share one of your videos about collar? Missed the name. I'm not sure what you're talking about, but if you go to my YouTube channel, or if you type Nate Schoemer e-collar, then the video that I did do on the remote training collar, and that video is how I use the collar as positive punishment. So if I use the stim, I use it as a correction. I don't do low-level stim. If I'm using it as negative reinforcement, I use the tone. I don't really use the vibrate. A lot of dogs, I don't like the way they react to the vibrate. A lot of dogs are afraid of the vibrate setting, but the tone seems to work very well. Okay. Okay, your dog is still eating nearly everything. So we kind of already answered that in some of the other questions. Thanks for the tips. I've recently started using an e-collar for communication purposes, and it does seem to be helping. Your advice was really helpful. I'll try what you suggested. Thank you. I appreciate that. Interested to see how it works out. I work a lot of hours. Also, I have a 2-year-old son and a newborn on the way. Do you recommend training a personal protection German Shepherd dog? I don't, when it comes to personal protection, so this is going to be the last one I'm going to have time with today. But again, I'm going to be doing a lot more of these. So those of you that maybe I don't answer your question, and also so what I'm doing for my channel members now, having this new setup makes it very easy for me to film these live Q&As. And what I'm doing for channel members now, so if you are a channel member, I did one last night. If you post a comment on any one of my videos, I will do a live Q&A and answer that question. It costs $1.99 to be a channel member. You can get one of the higher tiers if you want to support the channel more, but that prioritizes your comments. So even if you're unable to get your question answered in one of these live Q&As, if you're a channel member, you can post your comment on any video and I'll do a live Q&A. If there's a list, so I think I had like 4 or 5 that I went through yesterday. I'll just go through and it's much easier for me to answer them this way. And then once I answer it, I will take the link and I'll post it as my response to the comment. So that's a great way to get your questions answered in a pretty direct way. I mean, we're not having an actual conversation talking back and forth, but that's a good way to make sure your questions are being answered in this type of format. So with protection dogs, I usually don't recommend for people to get protection dogs. There's not that much of a need, to be honest, and it also increases the liability. So really having a German Shepherd, having any one of these more intimidating looking dogs, they act as a deterrent. You know, one of my friends had a good analogy. He says, if you're carrying a gun, people don't ask you if the gun works. They're going to assume that it works. If you have a German Shepherd that you can control very well, has nice obedience, and the dog's in the house, and naturally, most German Shepherds are going to be very cautious and reactive to people that come onto their property. It's built into their DNA often. Whereas, you know, a golden retriever is gonna, if someone breaks into the house, the golden retriever is gonna wanna see if that person's gonna take them on a walk or give them a treat. Totally different reaction. So looking at it more so as a deterrent is, I think, more than enough. You don't actually have to do protection training. If you want to do protection training, do a protection sport. But I don't recommend putting a dog in defense. I don't recommend doing the training that would make a dog civil, like something that a police department might do for their dog or something that the military might do with their dog. And what defense is, so most protection dog trainers, you know, I can't speak for everybody, but all the protection trainers that I train with, all the sport dogs, all the protection training was taught through play and pray. So prey drive, play drive. We play with the dogs when they're biting the tug. It's all, they're going after prey in a sense. So we're using that prey drive and it's fun. We're not putting them in defense. One of the ways that people put dogs in defense for protection work and more civil type work where the dog might actually have to bite a person is they do muzzle training. So they'll send the dog after someone who has no bite gear on with a muzzle, and they're doing a lot of muzzle punches, which I've done that before, and it's a little scary because they come at you pretty hard, and the fear that's in the back of your mind is like, what if this muzzle falls off? And then another thing they'll do is they'll put the dog on a back tie. They'll have someone come up with a bite sleeve or something like that, and maybe a padded stick or a whip for training. They will feed the bite to the dog. The dog will bite the sleeve. They'll slip the sleeve, and then they'll start cracking the whip at the dog as if they're actually attacking the dog, but now they no longer have any protection gear on. And what they want to see is they want to see the dog drop the bite sleeve and actively try biting the person. And the person is coming at them in a very aggressive manner, not in like a good, nice puppy. Like they're trying to look angry, they're trying to look intimidating, and they're trying to look like a real threat. And what they want to see is they want to see the dog actively trying to bite the person. And so it's like you can never really know for sure whether or not a dog is going to bite someone in a real situation until they actually do. You can have a pretty good idea. You can say like, I'm pretty confident this dog will bite if I send them at someone. But for personal dogs, I really don't see the need. As long as you have a big, powerful looking dog and you have well control, I'd rather have a powerful looking, friendly, happy-go-lucky dog that I can control and I can use an alert command if that was necessary than actually having one where I'm worried about them biting somebody. And you can teach a dog an alert command. I have a video on it. The way that I do it is, in this situation, it's also prey drive, but you can put the dog in defense if you want. I did it with so I trained, it was a rock singer, and he wanted his German Shepherd to be a protection dog. And so I didn't do any sort of civil training where basically what I was talking about, but I did a form of defense for the dog. So what I did was I put on a ski mask to look really scary. I had the owner and the dog. The dog was on a back tie, but the owner was standing next to the dog. I came around the corner. I looked very aggressive, very intimidating. And when I first started to approach the dog and the dog thought it was a real situation, the dog started to cower a little bit. The dog was afraid. There was real fear. And as I got closer, the dog did a little yelp sound. The moment the dog did the yelp sound, I acted as though the dog just shot a bullet at me. And I fell back and I was like, ah. And then I ran off. And the dog went, oh, wow, that was interesting. And then each time I came out in different situations, that became stronger and stronger. So I never went to the dog. I never gave him a bite. I never tried like I was going to hit him or anything like that. I just showed this intimidating picture of a thug with a mask on. And it got to the point where the moment I came out, that dog looked vicious. And then we put it on a command. And so if he had his dog and he felt like, or I mean, it was more so for his family. If his wife felt like, okay, someone's following me, I don't feel very comfortable, she could give the dog the alert command. And that dog, again, it looked very vicious, but dog actually never bit or did any of that. It was just a deterrent, but it was a very powerful deterrent. And so that would be the only thing that I would actually recommend. But really, one of the biggest deterrents when it comes to like robberies and things like that. So I had a friend who their husband was a photographer for homicide scenes in Southern California. And I was talking to him one day and he said all the homicide scenes that he had been to, if it wasn't like domestic dispute, every single one, not one of them owned a dog. Owning a dog is often a very big deterrent because it can alert the people inside the house, even if it's a little small yappy dog. And so that's how I look at it. Again, I know I say this each time. Hope that was valuable. As always, thank you everybody for watching. Thank you for tuning in. And remember that leadership is not dominance, it's communication. See you guys in the next one.